Welcome to
Winding Down with
Padre.
Padre. My name's Father White.
And I'm Father Michael.
And we're happy you're here for our new season.
Super excited.
This is a new session.
I'm a little nervous.
I'm a little nervous too.
I'm so glad we have wine on this session.
Whoo, because it's about to get heated.
It's a good series.
But I'm really excited because this is our series on church and state, Catholic voting principles. So we're welcoming all of you joining us. We invite you to please share this video so that more can be a part of this discussion as well. So,
and I'm noticing we can't shake too much because the table, the camera's shaking a little bit.
Oh, the camera's shaking.
Man.
Uh-oh.
See, when you were planning on beating your fist.
Then the camera's just going to have to shake, y'all. The camera's
okay.
going to,
All right.
Okay, so what should we talk about? Where should we begin?
First of all, what in the world are we doing talking about this? So we had a great idea that it would be very timely and that we would probably get a good number of viewers. But I was always told that you do not talk about these two topics, church and state, together. Church is separate from state. And when you do...
Politics and religion.
Politics and religion, right?
Yeah, I was told that too. Never bring it up.
Yeah. And I just haven't had a whole lot of healthy conversations between two people that can actually have these conversations without getting heated and hot and I mean,
isn't it amazing how I feel like, especially recently, anytime I'm anywhere with anyone, at some point politics comes up, and typically it doesn't take too long before there's a lot of heavy emotions.
And there's not a whole lot of joy, in the conversations. It's just
what's ironic is if it's a room full of people that agree, they still get very feisty and angry, and we're all kind of exhausted.
There's always an enemy.
And then if it's a room where people disagree, well, goodness, because then we're really in trouble.
Right. It's true.
I was always told, never bring up politics and religion. These are things that stay at home. Just don't even bring them up to anyone.
And so here we are, two priests.
Talking about politics. Yikes. Okay, well, that concludes our session with Winding Down with Padre.
I'm sure. Hey, cheers. What are we drinking?
What are we drinking tonight?
Because everybody wants to know.
We're drinking Venge. Is that short for revenge?
I don't know, but it's really good. Someone gave us this from the parish. I think it was a Winding Down
Family
sponsor.
Reserve. I mean, this is a fancy bottle.
It was a Winding Down sponsor.
Well, thank you to the sponsor because I am
praise the Lord
digging this one.
I think we're going to need about 3 more bottles for this session, though.
Well, that might be getting into general moral principles, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So what are we talking about? How do we talk about politics and religion in a way that's healthy? Maybe what are maybe some ground rules before we even jump in that perhaps you and I can keep in mind, and even our viewers as well. We do want to invite you to join us in the comments and participate in this discussion, but we need some ground rules for how to even talk about this, even in the comments. So what is something we can bring up?
Respect. I think mutual respect. I mean, we come maybe from different angles, from different viewpoints, from different backgrounds, from different political sways. But however, we're still human. We're still children of God. I mean, we're going to talk about that, but a discussion, a dialogue is just that. It's a dialogue from two different perspectives with the goal of hopefully coming out of a more clearer perspective, a greater understanding. And so to respect the opinion of the other person, to listen, man, that's so hard, to listen to what the other person is saying instead of thinking about what I'm going to say when they're done. About the respect in hopes that out of the conversation, a greater understanding of what's being talked about can be had by both parties.
So I mean, that's really the law of charity, that we're any kind of dialogue is between two human beings, and so foundational. We have to respect each other, even if we vehemently disagree. We still have to respect each other.
Absolutely.
So that's rule number 1. We have to have that as a guiding principle.
Yeah, and how about just where does the truth come into play, use of our reason? So I know sometimes when I have arguments, sometimes I let my emotion get in the way of just logic and reason. And then all of a sudden I'm arguing and defending my emotion, and you're
defending your pride. Yes.
Yeah, you're attacking me as a person rather than the position I'm taking, right?
Yes, it's true. I mean, just the idea of we have to learn how to think critically. And thinking is hard. Let's just admit that like critical thinking is actually really hard. It's so much easier to just take something that someone else has said and to just run with it and to get really excited about it. It's so much easier to just read a headline and get really excited and emotional about it. But to actually do your research and think critically, that's going to take a little bit of humility on our part and a little bit of getting our hands dirty. But you're all capable. All of us are capable. God gave us a mind, and He wants us to use it. So definitely want to let our human intellect, our reason, truth, to be our guiding principle. As
Yeah.
well.
So how does that play? How does that when we have the discussion about emotions and our mind, our reason? How would you maybe advise us?
Great. Yeah. I mean, both are incredibly important pieces of what makes us human, right? God gave us an intellect and a will, and He also gave us passions, emotions to kind of direct and or support the intellect and the will. Well, we need to put it all in order. The most important thing we can ever do as a human is to choose, and so the will is at the top. Our choice is what's most important. Our choices need to be guided by human reason, our mind, what is true. God is the way, the truth, and the life. Our emotions are good. It's a good thing to get excited and passionate. I'm very much a passionate person, but that should always be underneath our intellect. It should always be under what is reasonable. Our mind should always guide our emotions and keep our emotions in check. So as long as we're in order, then we can confidently be prudent as we move forward in making decisions.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to remember that in our discussions because if I get too heated, you just let me know.
All right. Yes, please control your emotions.
Right.
So again, emotions are good, human intellect good. We're going to try to keep charity and truth as our two guiding principles, charity and truth. So, yeah, where do we go from here?
Yeah, let's start with you. I mean, you brought up church and state, so would it be a good position to talk about just the relationship between the church and the state? So, can they go together? I mean, is it possible? Were they designed to go together? How is the church intended to maybe influence or have an influence on the state, and how is the state meant to have an influence on the church? Can they influence each other? Can they work together?
Yeah, what is their relationship?
What does that look like? Yeah.
I feel like it wasn't until I actually went to seminary, the school to become a priest, that I heard for the first time in my life that separation of church and state is actually not in the founding documents. I don't know if that just missed that in high school or if that was just an accident, but it was a misconception, at least for myself, that I was told that part of what makes us American is that there is a separation of church and state. Now, before I upset people that are listening, subtly there is something that's said. In the founding documents, they do say that the state does not have the authority to oppress religion, that people have freedom of religion. That's what they meant by church, like separation of church and state, that you can't stop us from being a religious people. But I find this quote very interesting from John Adams. He says this: "Our Constitution was made for religious men. It is made for men of no other kind but religious men." I mean, that's one of the founding fathers, and the fact that the freedom of religion is right there in our founding documents. Obviously, religion was very important, even at the beginning of our country. So it was never intended to be completely separate. It was never intended to be so as if they can't even speak with each other. Keep in mind the context. Like Americans, not Americans, but the first the founding fathers and the people from Europe that came, they came in order to have a free religion. Right. But religion necessarily it involves matters that are social, involves human beings.
Sure.
And that is very political, and so there is going to be a compatible conversation that needs to have, and so this idea that we need to separate the two completely and that they can't even influence each other or talk to one another is really unrealistic. We're kind of talking about a lot of the same things. There's a lot of overlap, and they need to be complementary, not just cooperative. then you be complementary and work together.
Yeah, because I mean, I think as a priest, the human formation, how religion, how faith has influenced how I understand the human person. I certainly would hope that that would influence politics, like how politics understands the human person.
Right.
How we don't treat a person as a tool, utilized, as utility, but we treat them with respect and dignity. And I know we're going to get to that, but like faith offers such a beautiful lens of humanity and the human person that I would hope would lend some influence on politics.
And part of our faith, the supernatural builds upon the natural. It kind of brings to life the natural. So government, politics is necessary. Because that serves is supposed to serve the common good of man, the natural good of man. But faith and religion, the church, is supposed to serve the supernatural good of man. But both ultimately have the same goal of the common good of human beings.
Yeah.
And so there should be a complementarity there.
Sure. And I mean, I think the reason we're having this conversation is like when I go to vote, I personally don't take my faith, it's not like a cloak. I don't just take it off and enter the voting booth as a civil citizen that doesn't have faith. Like, it's part of who I am. It's my faith in God and how God influences how I look at the world. It's who I am. And so if I'm going to go vote, I'm going to walk into that voting booth as a man of faith, seeing the world through that lens. But I have a moral compass. And so I want to know as I go to vote, how does my compass that I have, that faith gives me, how is that meant to direct the way that I vote? Because I know I have great power to influence culture. I mean...
it's a holistic understanding of life. It would almost be silly, no, it would totally be silly if a married man with children would be a married man with children on one day and then another day decide that that's not important to him. It's part of who, even though he's at work and he's not with his spouse and children, he's still a married man with children who is at work. So no matter where you're at, it's all part of who you are. And so if we are a people of faith, anything we do should be influenced by that. So it's just a holistic way of looking at humanity. But I will say there are certain limitations that, although they're compatible, there is still a distinctness about them. Okay, they are still separate. They are still, well, maybe not separate, but distinct. And what I mean by that is there are matters that the church should not get involved in regarding politics. Jesus did say, pay unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. You don't want your priest giving you your tax audit. That would just be very odd, and something I don't want to do anyway. But on the flip side, the government is unable to control certain aspects of our religious practices as well. That there are some limitations and some boundaries there. So they are distinct, but they're still complementary.
Sure. So with that said, I mean, do we have an obligation to vote? Do we have a duty to vote? Like as like either Christian or Catholic or people of faith? How does that fit in? Because I mean, I know I've heard it's your civic duty to vote. Does the church give wiggle room? Does it say, because you have faith, you don't have to vote? Like, what is it?
Yeah, and I guess usually the answer is yes, that there is a moral obligation to vote. I mean, in a rare circumstance, I could see, I don't really want to get into that right away, but typically I guess our moral obligation is to participate in the common good of society. And therefore, our moral obligation is to do our part in promoting that common good. And that might mean, and very often means, getting involved with political opportunity and political discussions. So
yeah, and I think that's where our conversation is probably going to get good and fun and juicy, of the common good. as we talk
Because
about
what is the common good, right?
Common good, right? So there's all kinds of debates and both sides on people arguing, well, this is the common good. And
Right.
well, I see it differently. This is the common good. Well, you have your opinion, I have my opinion. You stay over there, I stay over here. All of a sudden we have two sides, and we'll put a color on them, we'll put an animal on them, we'll put it, it's like,
Yes.
so it's like, well, what?
I mean,
there
you and
has to
I have
be-
argued even before here about what would be best for the parish. And it really is just a matter of strategy sometimes. Like we really want the same thing and we have the same ultimate goal, but we have a disagreement about method. And
Right.
so suddenly that's a political discussion. That's very important to have.
Yeah,
So you're right. That's when it's going to get fun and heated.
absolutely. There's a difference between policy and principle. I was kind of reading in some of our prep of,
Yeah.
principle is at the core of the common good, but its policy is how you bring it about. And
Yeah.
there's a difference between arguing about policy, how do we make this happen, and the actual principle of something, the core of something, of what it is.
I'm glad you brought that up because our goal, as we have these 7 sessions, is to talk about the principles. We may expose certain policies from time to time, but fundamentally, our goal is not necessarily to control your life in the voting booth and to control precisely what vote you cast. Our goal is to equip you with some principles so that you can feel prepared to actually go and make an informed decision on your own.
Yeah,
So.
and in good conscience, leave saying, I was well informed, I made the best decision possible to fulfill the most good and, affect the least evil. Right?
Yeah, I want to read a quote from the Catechism. Catechism 2239.
In the Catechism, that would just
Thank
for
you,
those
yeah,
who maybe
yeah.
are visiting with us.
Catechism of the Catholic Church is a thick compendium of all the Church's teachings from tradition that are rooted in Scripture. So basically, for 2,000 years, Christians have been having discussions on what does the Bible actually mean? Who is Jesus, and what do we actually believe? And with all those discussions, 2,000 years in, recently, in the past, I forget when it was published, but not that long ago, this past century, some really great scholars put the most important pieces in one book.
Summarize it.
And kind of summarize for us. So it's an awesome resource, Catechism of the Catholic Church. So paragraph 2239, it says this: "It is the duty of citizens to contribute along with the civil authorities to the good of society in a spirit of truth, justice, solidarity, and freedom." So I read that just to say that it's our co-responsibility as people of faith to work with our civil leaders to bring about the common good of society, the natural goods of society.
Sure.
So in that sense, there is an obligation. There is a moral weight to whether or not we vote. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
There's a moral element to it.
So much we can say about that, because there's an election coming up.
There's an election.
There's a presidential election.
And I'll say this: when I turned 18, it was actually the election of 2008. I didn't turn. I turned 18 right after the election, so I wasn't able to vote for that particular election. But it was the first time I really paid attention to an election, and I guess what I learned since then is, oh my goodness, there are so many more opportunities to vote, even beyond the presidential election. And those are sometimes even more pertinent to get involved with. So it's really like, I guess I want to keep that in mind. Like, there is a presidential election that is coming, and that is definitely very serious, and we do need to consider that. But also in November, there'll be other things that we need to consider. And even not just this November, but moving forward, there are local elections, and whether it's in the parish or in the state, there are particular laws that sometimes we get to vote on, so that we're not even voting on a person, but rather a policy.
Sure.
And so voting is a lot bigger than this one presidential election. However, this presidential election is still
It is.
very important.
So, I mean, a lot going on. A lot of talking heads out there. I mean, you turn on the news, and it just depends on what news channel you're saying. They're going to say two different things. There's a lot of newsprint that you can read out there. There's a lot of different magazines and articles. How do we know what to allow to influence us? How do
Right.
we know what's the guiding principle? Like what is there a compass out there? I mean, I hear the church talk about like
Sure.
follow your conscience. Well,
Yeah.
what is a conscience? And
Yeah, I love that. In fact, Nick.
like, you know,
Yeah, I mean, sure.
what if
We
different
could
people? What if
have
different
different
people think of different things and like I'm just following my conscience? You know,
Yeah, and that makes it hard to argue against.
right?
Um, yes, conscience is important. We have to follow our conscience, but it's possible for someone's conscience to be erred, to be erroneous, to be wrong. And we actually just had a discussion on conscience, Krista and Nick,
Mm-hmm.
last month. So it's on our Facebook page. To get a little bit deeper into conscience. But what I can say is this: that we do have an obligation to form it well, and therefore then to follow it. But in our forming of our conscience, how do we do it? And there are a number of things we can do, but ultimately, we have been given a a universal moral code that is accessible to be known by anybody, even non-Christians, are able to know the difference between right and wrong. Now, sometimes people are erred in their perceptions of it, but the possibility of knowing the difference between right and wrong is part of our design. It's part of this natural law that's within us. And so all of our political principles, sometimes you might say, well, what gospel did that come from? Where in the Bible? Um, a lot of times it's indirectly in the Bible, but ultimately, too, like we have been given a human intellect that can know truth that is objective, and there's this moral code called the natural law that we can follow. So that's going to guide a lot of our principles that we kind of dive into in the coming weeks. Is the natural law, which is church talk for a very complicated thing.
Yeah, I'm just like, what? How do I know? I mean, yeah, I'm definitely intrigued about the natural law, and I'm assuming if I can follow the natural law and not even be a person of faith, I'm assuming that just intrigues me. You know, is it the voice and
And how can we say that?
yeah,
Like that's probably something very easily. Well, I don't believe that, but what I mean by natural law is that there is something about the design of who we are as humans
right,
that directs what we were made for and how to flourish. Even Aristotle talks about flourishing, human flourishing, and it was all according to like how we are made and what we were made for. And he was not a Christian.
and this is the great debate of politics. You know, just the an understanding of the human person and how we're made, and what guides our principles and how we see things and how we want to shape culture and how we want to. Shaping of culture allows a human person to flourish rather than to be squelched and to be kept from being fully alive. And so, how important it is that we have this conversation.
Right.
Because policies are being made by people who we elect, and that those policies shape our culture, and our culture allows us to either grow, flourish, or
And that's why people get so passionate about politics, because it really does affect all of us, and it affects human beings, and we all want a happy life. We all want to flourish. But what we are going to proclaim as a people of faith is that we believe that there is some objective things about who we are as humans that cannot be argued against. That there are just objective things about like our design, and those objective things are going to guide our political discussions because there is a way to be happy. Ultimately, as people of faith, we know that one way is Jesus Christ and eternal life with Him. But even in this earth, there are ways to be happy in accord with how we were designed. So
I can't wait to have the conversation. We're just warming up. We're just getting started.
there's so much to say. Goodness,
There's so much wine to be had.
Yes. Okay. Well, why don't we give them some resources as we kind of
Okay,
close
great.
up the night and kind of let them know what they can
Yeah.
expect. So so I think we have
Yeah, what would be your go-to? Are we gonna put these in maybe the cliff notes, like underneath, maybe?
Yeah, we can maybe attach this to the video. My number one go-to right now. Now there are a lot of places you could go, but is ewtn.com/vote. So that's ewtn.com/vote, and they did a really good job of just kind of pulling from a lot of different sources and putting it all in one spot for us. And just providing some principles without getting involved in the particulars of this presidential debate. So, so that's my number one resource. Yeah, another one is I get a daily email that I find very helpful, and it's not necessarily about politics all the time, but do you ever get just tired of the media sometimes, where like it's just hard to even know what's up, and you just want to turn it off?
Yeah. I'm like, can it's the same thing with business. Can I just get like one daily update of everything going on in the world, concise,
Right.
and just so read it?
Right. I mean, I got annoyed with the media, and so I just turned it off. But then suddenly people would tell me things, and I was out of the loop. And so there's this thing called The Loop that that is provided by Catholic Vote. It's a private organization that is not affiliated with either party, but just proclaims to be Catholic. And what they do is give you a summary every day in your inbox of just the biggest headlines, both globally and nationally, but through the lens of a Catholic perspective. And then they have links if you want to read more and all that stuff. So I find it very helpful just to kind of stay in the loop. So that's catholicvote.org. And they'll have a little tab on there that says loop. And you can get the daily email. Those are my top two recommendations.
Yeah, love it. I mean, I've been eating up EWTN.
Yeah.
Just kind of reading on just to kind of prepare for our talks, and it's a great resource. So excited.
Okay, so next week we're going to be getting into some of the actual topics, like some of the actual big topics. So I think next week we're going to get into. Should we say it? Let's say it. Should we say it? I'll say this: that there are some things that are negotiable and some things that are non-negotiable that we can talk about as faith. So we're going to get into the first non-negotiable topic.
So you're either in or you're out?
Basically, this is the church proclaiming you have to be on our side on this one.
A line in the sand.
It's pretty bold. So
it's a line in the sand.
Yeah.
And it's not one of those lines that the wave comes in and just like washes the sand off, and it's like, what happened?
So if you want to know more about negotiables and non-negotiables and what the heck we're talking about, join us next week at 8 p.m. for Winding Down with Padre. Church and State, Catholic Voting Principles.
Hey man, this is going to be fun.
All right.